Hello and welcome to Of the People. I am Robert Chernin. Thank you so much for joining us again today. We need to talk about today guns in America. I mean, is there a day that goes by that we don't talk about guns in America? But the reason it's important, so the FBI released the latest statistics. And for the 47th straight month, there have been over 1 million purchases or sales of guns to Americans. First of all, congratulations, America. But I think we need to have a conversation about why this is so important. The Second Amendment, as everyone knows, is right to bear arms. It says a well-regulated militia shall obviously have the right to bear arms, in a free state. And the key is the free state, because I think people need to understand that it is not only your right to own a firearm, but if you understand the Constitution, it is your duty and obligation to own a firearm. Own one, be trained on it, be responsible for it. But the real key here with understanding the Second Amendment is it was second for a reason. It's there to protect the First Amendment, right? So in a free society, and you have to remember this is still the great experiment. Why is this a great experiment? Because in every other country, power flows from the top down. These radicals and revolutionaries in 1776 and really in 1787, when the Constitution was written and the Bill of Rights, enshrined the power flows from the bottom up. So to protect that, that's why you have the right to bear arms, and it is unfettered. And by the way, what it says specifically in the Second Amendment is it said shall not be infringed. And the word infringed, if you look it up, it says shall not be limited. So understand that the right to bear arms is the right to bear arms to protect what? The freedoms in the First Amendment. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, right? 4 or 5 references, either directly or indirectly, to the freedoms that is referenced in the Second Amendment as a free state. So why is all this important? Because in October 30th of 2008, then candidate Barack Obama said famously, we are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming America. Well, 15 years later, folks, how do you like the fundamental transformation? Because what's happening here, as we've talked about, is first they're going after man's laws, and they're doing that by going after the people that enforce the laws. Well, first of all, they're changing the laws. Then they're going after the people who enforce the laws, law enforcement. And then they're going after people who enforce the laws in the court system, which is the judiciary. Then they're going after God's laws, and they're convincing you that there's more than 2 genders, or at least they're trying to. After that, the last stand is the right to bear arms. Once they get the guns, then there's nothing stopping this fundamental transformation that Barack Obama talked about in 2008. We're going to talk more about it in the show as we're coming up, but understand that it is not only your right, but it is your duty to bear arms as a citizen of the United States. And what you're really protecting is the form of government that exists nowhere else in the world. So when you hear about Second Amendment rights and right to bear arms and those kinds of things, remember what you're bearing arms for. Yes, self-protection, of course, self-defense, of course, but it is your right to bear arms to protect your freedoms. And once they get the guns, now, there's probably supposedly 340 some odd million firearms of various sorts in the country. They're not getting the guns. They're certainly not getting mine. But once they get the guns, there's nothing to stop this fundamental transformation. Again, it's not just a right to bear arms. It's a duty to bear arms. Joining me now to go a little further into this whole conversation about guns in America is my lovely co-host, Ericka Redic. Hello, Ericka.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. That was so good. I loved your opening monologue. And I think I want to reiterate something that you said that I think is so important. The Second Amendment says, shall not be infringed.
Correct.
And if you read the rest of the Bill of Rights, none of the other reiterated rights did the founding fathers say shall not be infringed? Do you think that they intended for the first right to be infringed? They just like left it out by accident? Or do you think it's more likely that they were so intentional to make sure that we understood how important and to what extent the Second Amendment mattered in the foundation of this country? They not only said this is your right from God, bestowed on you from God, not from man, but you will not infringe. You will not get in the way of this right. And the left really tries to cover that up and say, but common sense gun laws. But common sense,
Well, look, we're going to go through some of that. And as I like to say, the problem with the argument on the other side is it starts with what's the expression? Lies, damn lies, and then statistics. Right. So, right. So, for instance, by the way, so glad you brought that up. So CNN just came out with an article. So you've got to understand that CNN, and the article is entitled "How U.S. Gun Culture Stacks Up in the World." Now, right off the bat, they say ubiquitous gun violence, right? Ubiquitous, folks, means found everywhere. You got to be 8th grade level for me so I can understand it. I had to look the word
that's
up.
$1.50 word.
Ubiquitous gun violence in the United States have left few places unscathed. But then they go in to compare that there's 120 guns for every 100 Americans, and that the gun violence is out of control compared to, and by the way, the 2 per capita countries that are second and third. One is the Falkland Islands. How they even made it into this, I don't really understand, right? And then the third one in all of this is, let me get this right again. Yemen. Great, right? So United States.
Oh God!
Right. Well, they're going per capita, but that's my point about statistics, right? They estimate that 44% of Americans own firearms, and that's fine, right? But here's the real key, and I'm going to test you. Name for me what other countries in the world have a legal right or a constitutional right to bear arms. Now, I'll give you a hint. There's only 2.
Oh, really?
There is only 2.
I'm surprised that there are any. A country with the legal right to bear arms: Turkey or Hungary.
I am hungry, but that's not the country, right?
No, I'm just thinking about because
the countries are Mexico and Guatemala. And by the way, in Mexico, even though there is a right to bear arms, there is one gun store in the country, and I don't mean one location, folks. It is a government-run gun store. So you have to buy it from the government. So again, you get this sort of, tin pot dictator stuff where you can buy arms, but only if we let you, and only in certain situations.
By a government that is like run by and corrupted by the drug cartels and human traffickers and whatever. Right. But okay. Right. Yep.
So they go through all these statistics, and you'll love this one, right? So they quote different studies, and again, it depends on what you are talking about. But they then go in and they say the rate in the U.S. is 8 times greater than Canada, which has the 7th highest rate of gun ownership, 22 times higher than in the European Union, and 23 times higher than Australia, according to the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation Data 2019. And they throw all this data at you, and in the hopes of getting back to your original point about shall not be infringed. The numbers don't matter. What they lose sight of is, what is it you're protecting? You're protecting a form of government that doesn't exist anywhere in the world, which is why the founders, obviously, I'm assuming I wasn't there, but if you move yourself back to 1787 and understand that these radicals broke from their mother country, Great Britain, and needed arms to do that, to depose a tyrannical government.
That's right.
Right? I mean, that's what this was about. No taxation without representation. And we can keep going, going down the line of all those other things that if you took social studies or civics, or they force fed you it, you would know this, right? Not you, but
Right.
people.
No,
in the
that's
country.
what. No,
But
we're
the
the
Second
one
Amendment
country
is there to
go ahead.
protect the first. That's what you have to understand, because that's where. So go through the Bill of Rights and tell me, other than the First and Second Amendment, where the word freedom is used.
Oh, interesting.
So freedom is referenced 5 times, either directly or indirectly, in the First Amendment, the Bill, the Bill of Rights, right?
Yep.
Now,
Freedom of
Second Amendment,
association,
it
freedom
says
of speech, freedom of all of the, basically,
freedom of assembly,
our
freedom
rights
of the press,
are enumerated.
and freedom to petition the government without threat of harm.
That's right.
Right? Those are the 5 freedoms that are enumerated in the First Amendment.
Yep.
Right? The Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia, right? And let me give you the exact wording, even though I should have this committed to memory. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, right? So there's the connection between the First Amendment and the Second. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So take the word infringed and say shall not be limited. What's right? Where's the problem with that? The interpretation.
I mean, I don't have a problem with that. What do you mean?
I wasn't saying you have a problem with that, but I mean, the arguments we get into, because what we really need to get into.
The arguments that they have for it is the punctuation. They want to, so this gets back to that same conversation we were having about the Supreme Court and the judiciary.
Sure.
That we're originalists, right? So we believe that the words meant what they meant when they were written down. And so when the Second Amendment was written, well regulated just meant that you were trained, like you said, there's a duty and a responsibility that they were saying, well regulated. We want everyone to have them. The right of the militia. When asked, who was it? The founding father enumerated when asked, oh my God.
Which founding father is this? Are we drawing a blank? God. Come on.
Yes. Madison, when he was asked, who is the militia? He said, everyone in the country is the militia. They were very clear that they meant everyone should have a gun in the country.
Know how to use it and be responsible with it.
Exactly. And because we were the first country, we were the first people to fight off an imperialist nation to defend our own freedoms against an imperial country, to then become anyway, I'm sorry, I interrupted. You're going somewhere. Ooh, I love this topic, I know, Robert. I'm going to try to rein it in. I'm going to try to rein it in.
Come on, bring it back, please. So the first issue is they try to, I would say, not confuse the issue, but they try to distract by citing all these statistics. And as we've learned, I mean, they're sort of, you can get designer statistics, right? I mean, it's like sneakers. There used to be 3 types of sneakers. Now there's 1,000 types, and with arches, with right. So you can select your news source to get the statistics or the studies that you want that confirm your bias already.
Correct.
So statistics are not going to carry the day. I would argue that if only 44% of Americans own firearms, we need to get the other 56% to own firearms.
That's low.
But here's where they then go. So then after that, they talk about the suicide rates, right? And again, remember, this is a CNN article, right? So they basically said that 63% of U.S. gun-related deaths are self-inflicted. So if now let's assume that statistic is even remotely correct. That means that of all the gun violence, you're talking 63% are suicides. So now we're not talking about guns, are we? But we're talking about a mental health issue, because guns aren't good or bad. The gun itself is not inherently good or bad. It's what you do with the gun that makes it good or bad.
Well, and what I learned, correct. And this is the thing that they try to skew the information. So I did an interview with Dr. John Lott from the Crime Research Prevention I'm going to get the acronym wrong. And what they found is that in countries where they have no gun rights, that the suicide rates are equivalent. So people just find different ways to commit suicide without the gun. So limiting
if you're
gun
going to commit
ownership.
suicide, I'm going to kill myself. I'm not really, but I'm going to kill myself. But since I don't have a gun, I'm going to live. That's not the way it works. That's not mental health. That's not mental health.
So we're going to change. One of the things that they do to skew the numbers, and when you're talking about lies, damn lies, and statistics, is they're shifting the goalpost, right? And so we're not comparing apples and oranges. We're comparing apples and oranges if we do that.
Would you make up your mind, please?
So what you have to do is go, okay, well, how many self-defensive uses of a firearm are there versus how many homicidal?
You're missing the point.
Oh,
statistics should inform, but trust the science. Statistics should not be determinate. Statistics should tell you there should be a conversation or a dialogue. Statistics tell you there should be maybe even an argument because, right, again, same CNN article, they then go into a Stanford University study. Since it's Stanford, it must be correct because they're all smart.
Oh, because, yes, of course.
Here's what it said.
Ivy Leaguers. No, wait, hold on. The Ivy Leaguers who have admittedly said that they're letting in people with lower IQs and lower grades and all of that stuff for affirmative action purposes. But continue. Move on.
You're stealing our thunder from this third segment. Oh no, the second segment. So they go on to say that almost 8 times men who own fire guns, yeah, I'm good. Who own handguns are almost 8 times. Are you laughing at me? Are almost
We're
8
both
times
all
more
fired
likely
up, I think,
to die of self-inflicted wounds as men who don't. But women who own handguns were 35 times more likely to die by firearm suicide compared with those who didn't. Now, the only caveat is they surveyed 26 million people over 11 years in California. I mean, no disrespect to California, but if I lived in California, I might, think about committing suicide as well, since, given the state of affairs in California, of which I've been to a lot, and where my siblings live, yeah. Okay, I sort of understand that. Just kidding, folks. It is a mental health issue, and that's part of the problem. Rather than address the issue of mental health, they want to demonize, yet again, firearms. So now let's restrict your rights to firearms because, again, man's laws, God's laws, get the guns. There's no issue with transforming America. Third point I want to bring up. So we've talked about right to bear arms.
They don't want you to know, many of these organizations don't want you to know that because they're funded, right? Those statistics come from organizations that are in the mental health realm or the public health realm or whatever it is. And so they actually lobbied the CDC to remove the number of self-defense uses of a firearm from the website. So
that's
1.4 million, correct. 1.4 million self-defense uses of a firearm in any given year, but we're gonna hide that information, and we're gonna take away your ability to defend yourself in order to address this one thing over here that we ourselves are causing. But third point.
What they're really saying is there's too much gun violence. And rather than address the issue of why there's gun violence, let's just get rid of the guns, and therefore there'll be no violence, which is such a stupid.
It's a lie. It's a bald-faced lie.
Well, look, I think some of them are intent with what I would call their deception, but some people are just useful idiots. But here's the third component that needs to go out there. So right, we've talked about the statistics. We've talked about mental health that doesn't get addressed. And mental health, by the way, also relates to the breakup of the family, in my opinion, because they would much rather have a village raise everybody. But here's the third thing. They then go into the statistics of mass shootings, right? And it depends on who's defining mass shootings, right? Because the Gun Violence Archive, which is in D.C., right, says that in 2019, there were 417 mass shootings in America. 400. So that means there was more than one a day, a mass shooting in America, yet a more, let's call it, realistic approach. They say it's conservative, so it must be wrong. But regular mass shootings, they say, are in 2019, if you go by what's called Silva, right? William Patterson University, Professor Silva shows that there were, let's see, what's the number? There were 8 in 2019.
Yep.
Right? And again, those 8 people, there were 68 people who were killed, 91 injured in 2019. So again, it's the definitions they're trying to use to make an argument.
Correct.
So they don't make an argument. The opponents to gun ownership, the opponents to Second Amendment, don't make an argument to come up with what's the logical outcome. They already have the outcome they want.
Correct.
And they're backfilling the argument to say, because of all of this, you should give up your guns.
Well, and this is
right?
and that's it's so dishonest. And that's the thing that is so frustrating. They changed the definition of what a mass shooting is from basically a shooter who goes out and does harm on purpose, right? Like the Pulse nightclub shooting, or the grocery stores incident, or Columbine school shootings, whatever, to include that 417 number. That includes drive-bys and gang violence. So rather than the 8, which is the more honest number, okay, of a sick person going out to create as much destruction as possible
at the temple in Pittsburgh, or the synagogue in the temple in Pittsburgh, or the church in Charleston. Right, exactly.
Correct. So now you're including gang violence in the inner cities, and those things have very different MOs and solutions, and so they're just conflating information to make it confusing and sound much worse than it is in reality.
See, I actually think you're being overly nice about it. I think it comes back to what I said before. They have a desired outcome. They don't want to do the research and then see what the data says. They want to, here's the outcome we want. Now let's backfill the data to justify a decision we've already made.
We want to scare people to death.
Right?
Yep.
It's a mental health issue. And look, with 340, what are there, 330 million Americans, and there's 343 million guns, or firearms in America? Good luck with getting those back. And they're going to cite every statistic they've got. What Australia did it, and they bought back the guns, and it went down. And by the way, folks, 2020 was the high point. And part of that was COVID. Part of that was shooting a firearm at a range is generally an outdoor activity. Right? By the way, not only were more guns sold in 2020 than, in the last 20 years of the history of the country, more bicycles were sold in 2022, as well. So, you gotta understand what you're being spoon fed here. So, look, I don't want to run long on this.
What else was happening? What else was happening in 2020 though? Let me think. Political violence, where people were allowed to run roughshod over their city and just murder people in the streets.
Wait. No. They were mostly peaceful. And mostly peaceful.
We would never advocate political violence on left. Never.
Mostly peaceful is kind of pregnant, right? You either are or you're not. No one I've ever seen is kind of pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. So there's either mostly peaceful. Well, talk to David Dorn's widow in St. Louis about mostly peaceful with those protests, right?
That's right.
Look, let's end this segment where we started, folks, which is the Second Amendment is there. The right to bear arms, which shall not be infringed, is there for a reason. It's to protect your rights and liberties in the First Amendment. It is not only your freedom, your right to bear arms. As an American citizen, it is your duty to bear arms, and obviously to bear arms responsibly. Folks, I'm Robert Chernin. with Of the People, my lovely co-host,
Ericka Redic.
and we will be right back. Stay tuned.